Right now, you are sitting in a warm room, surrounded by comfort, completely safe. But somewhere deep inside your nervous system, buried beneath every rational thought you have ever had, there is a structure that once watched a human being burn and felt relief. Not horror, relief. And the terrifying truth is that the psychology behind ritual sacrifice never left you. It just changed its costume. You have probably heard the word sacrifice and imagined something primitive. Smoke rising from a stone altar, painted faces, screaming. But psychologists and anthropologists who have spent decades studying ancient human behavior have uncovered something far more unsettling. The people who performed these rituals were not monsters. They were not psychopaths. They were you. They had the same brain architecture, the same emotional wiring, the same fundamental need for control in a world that felt completely uncontrollable. That is what makes this so dark. To understand what was really happening in ancient ritual sacrifice, you have to understand what the human brain does when it can tolerate uncertainty. When survival is at stake and outcomes feel random, your nervous system does not accept helplessness. It cannot. Anthropologist David Graeber, who studied sacrificial economies across dozens of cultures, observed that sacrifice almost always emerges where there is a catastrophic gap between what a community needs and what it can predict: drought, disease, war, famine. The universe appears indifferent, and indifference is psychologically unbearable. So the brain manufactures agency. If something went wrong, something must have caused it. And if something caused it, something can fix it. This is not superstition. This is the fundamental architecture of human cognition. Your brain is a pattern-seeking machine. It will find a pattern where none exists before it will accept randomness. Researchers call this apophenia, the tendency to perceive meaningful connections between unrelated things, and ancient humans had it in exactly the same intensity you do. The difference is that your brain projects patterns onto your social media feed, onto your relationship arguments, onto your career failures. Their brains projected patterns onto the storm that destroyed the harvest. So when a drought hit and the crops died, the community did not conclude that weather is chaotic and life is uncertain. That conclusion would have been psychologically annihilating. Instead, they concluded that something had been neglected. A debt was owed. A god was owed. And in the logic of ancient exchange economies, a debt that could not be paid in grain or gold could only be paid in life. This is what anthropologist Walter Burkert called the biology of sacrifice in his landmark work on the subject. He argued that ritualized killing served as a neurological pressure valve, not just a spiritual one. The act of sacrifice allowed an entire community to metabolize collective anxiety through a single controlled, witnessed event. Think about what that actually means. An entire village, each person carrying months of accumulated fear, loss, and helplessness, gathers around a single focal point. There is ceremony, there is structure, there's a narrative that explains the suffering and promises resolution. And then the sacrifice occurs, and in the aftermath, the community feels calmer. Not because a god intervened, but because the human nervous system, when it acts collectively and decisively, experiences a profound reduction in the hormonal markers of chronic stress. Cortisol drops. Social bonding chemicals surge. The group has done something together. It has exerted agency. It has followed a script that ends with hope rather than despair. You do this. Right now, in your daily life, You do versions of this constantly. When you feel helpless about your finances, you perform rituals. You check your bank balance obsessively, even though checking it changes nothing. You arrange your desk before starting a task you are anxious about. You wear a particular item of clothing before a high-stakes meeting. These behaviors are neurologically identical in their function to the preparation rituals performed before ancient sacrificial ceremonies. They are actions taken not because they change outcomes, but because performing them reduces intolerable uncertainty into something that feels structured, something that feels like agency. But the psychology goes deeper than anxiety management, because sacrifice was never just about calming individual fear. It was about managing a social organism, and here is where the research becomes genuinely disturbing. Evolutionary psychologist Robin Dunbar, famous for his work on group size and social cohesion, has pointed out that large groups of humans face a fundamental problem. In small groups, social bonds are maintained through direct interaction. But once a community grows past a certain threshold, something else is needed. A collective act, a shared experience of intensity so profound that it bypasses individual differences and creates what he calls social fusion. The group stops being a collection of separate people and becomes, temporarily, a single entity. Shared suffering, shared relief, shared belief. Ritual sacrifice, when viewed through this lens, was one of the most effective social technologies ever invented. Not because it worked on the gods, but because it worked on humans. A community that had gathered to witness a sacrifice and survived it together was a community that trusted each other more deeply. That was bonded by a secret only they shared. That had a story about itself. We are the people who did what had to be done, and we survived the year. Now consider what this means about you. The rituals you participate in today that create collective identity are not so different in their function. The sports event, where you suffer through a loss together and then celebrate a win. The national ceremony that gathers people in shared grief after a tragedy. The corporate team-building event that creates manufactured shared intensity. None of these involve blood. But the neural mechanism being activated is structurally the same. The human brain does not fundamentally distinguish between ancient sacrifice and modern ritual. It only distinguishes between belonging and not belonging, between certainty and chaos. There is another layer here that most people never examine, and it is perhaps the darkest one. Psychologist James Waller, in his research on how ordinary people come to commit atrocities, identified something he called moral disengagement, the gradual process by which normal human empathy is systematically suspended through social permission, authority, and narrative framing. In ancient sacrificial cultures, this process was embedded into the ritual itself. The person or animal to be sacrificed was not a victim in the cognitive framing of the community. They were elevated, chosen. Their death was reframed as the highest honor available. The priest was not a killer. He was an intermediary. The community was not watching a murder. They were witnessing a sacred transaction. Your brain runs this same software. When you dismiss the suffering of a group you have been told deserves it, or when you participate in institutional processes that harm people but feel clean, because the harm is bureaucratic and distributed, you're running the same cognitive code. Moral disengagement, the narrative that transforms a harmful act into a necessary one. Ancient priests and modern institutions both understand that the most important thing is not whether an act causes harm. It is whether the story surrounding that act makes the participants feel justified. This is what makes ritual sacrifice so important to study, not because it tells you about ancient superstition, but because it tells you about the human brain under pressure, what it needs to feel safe, what it will do to manufacture that safety, what narratives it will accept when uncertainty becomes intolerable, how easily it can transform harm into meaning. The drought is still coming. Maybe not in the form of dead crops. Maybe in the form of a failing relationship, a precarious job, a medical diagnosis you are waiting for. And your brain will do exactly what ancient human brains did. It will search for a pattern. It will identify a cause. It will reach for a ritual that creates the feeling of agency. And if the social environment around you has already built a structure that offers a clear villain, a clear ceremony, and a clear promise of resolution, if you participate, your brain will find that structure extraordinarily difficult to resist. Right now, you are sitting in a warm room, surrounded by comfort, completely safe. But somewhere deep inside your nervous system, the same ancient code is running. It is not waiting for a drought. It is waiting for the next moment when the world feels out of control. And when that moment arrives, it will offer you exactly the same thing it offered the people who built the altars: a story, a ritual, the feeling that something is being done, and the desperate, neurologically wired, biologically ancient hope that the sacrifice will be enough.